welcome to the Friday, May 29th edition of the Yamhill Leadership Roundtable. And all of our legislative delegation is on a Zoom call with the governor right now. So, yeah, exactly. So they couldn't join us. But here we have Commissioner Rick Olson from Yamhill County, Commissioner Casey Keeler from Yamhill County. We've got Councilor Remy Drapkin with the city of McMinnville. We've got Mayor Beth Wojtowski from Dayton. We've got Shannon Buckmaster from the Chehalem Valley Chamber of Commerce. We've got Joya Goodrum for the McMinnville Chamber of Commerce. Welcome. And we have Commissioner Mary Starrett, Yamhill County. All right, thank you, everybody. And a lot has happened in the last week. And we've started the conversation about phase 2. And I'm wondering, Commissioner Starrett, whether you would be willing to begin the conversation and what would you like to tell people in the community and here on the call?
Well, we are getting more and more information all the time about phase 2. And phase 2 is, we're getting a little bit more, like we found out that they were going to allow us to stay out until midnight. I guess we've been good. So our curfew is probably going to be extended till midnight. And they're going to, and they're working on additional guidelines. But really what we have is the original prerequisite and then a few other things that are related to contact tracing and being able to show that they're able to get that done within 24 hours and have a 70% rate when it comes to a positive case, being able to trace that. Those are the additional requirements, and we're looking at, for instance, venues. Now, theaters and churches are going to be considered one type of a venue, so there'll be similar types of requirements for those. And we heard a little bit more about numbers, so again, from 25 to 50 and then 100 outside. And just basically, we're waiting on that. And according to our Health and Human Services Director, Lindsay Manfred, we're on target to be able to submit an application, which we could do, I am assuming, as early as Wednesday. And then for hopefully the first time we'd be able to be approved, the earliest date would be the 6th, which is Saturday. So they're anticipating that most counties are going to shoot for that. So we're hoping that we'll be able to get in queue and have that done. That's the basic information.
Yeah, that really is. Thank you for getting us started with that. Questions now. Mayor Wojtowski has a question for you, Commissioner.
Thanks. Hi, Mary.
Hi, Mayor.
Hi, Commissioner, sorry. On those new gatherings of the up to 50 indoor or 100 outdoor, do you know if the intention is that individual households and groups would still keep distance during phase 2, or would that be 100 people outside who are not necessarily being asked to keep those distances?
Well, I think, and I might be, and I didn't say mayor for any other reason other than I typically call you Beth, and I know I shouldn't, so I was trying to catch myself. So you can call me Mary. I can call just about everything these days. So whatever you want to call me is good.
Well, I usually call you Commissioner too, but I got casual for a second.
Based on Mary, what you call me, Beth, that's nice.
Quiet, Rick.
No, Mary is fine. The only person who has to call me Commissioner is my husband. But anyway. But what I understand, and Commissioner Akula or Olson, whoever was on this call this morning with the governor's office, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding from the PowerPoint presentation is that the 50% would be 50 number would be indoors and the 100 outdoors. And I believe the physical distancing is still a requirement regardless of what the number is.
Okay, thank you.
That is what I understood to be the case as well. Yeah. And then there will be additional guidance for overnight camps and for youth sports coming as part of phase 2 as well. Any other questions for Commissioner Starrett?
Any other types of businesses that would be included in the reopen in phase 2?
Well, my understanding is at least from what they talked about in terms of, as Commissioner Kula pointed out, it was going to be overnight camps, which had not been allowed before this, and youth sports. I know there was a big discussion about pickleball. I don't know what the obsession with pickleball is, but they're apparently getting a lot of calls about that. So there's the guidance on that. But, and pools, working on guidance for opening pools. So I know those are all in the process of being discussed. As far as phase 3, the question was asked, will phase 3 not be allowed unless and until there's a vaccine or a different protocol for treatment? And I don't think they have a hard and fast answer other than phase 3 is going to be phase 3 after phase 2, and we're not there yet.
I think that's how I heard it as well, Commissioner. Shannon Buckmaster has a question for you as well.
Not hear me?
Shannon, we can't hear you.
At all?
Now we can.
Okay. Wow. Thank you. My apologies. Usually I'm better at technology, we think. I live in front of these screens these days. Okay, so the question I have is, how have we seen, I mean, really just talking about the safety component as we approach phase 2, we know that it creates more economic damage to open and have to reclose than it is to delay opening. So how are we monitoring, how are we tracking? Have you seen any changes in our local cases, our testing ability, any of our contact tracing opportunities? So how well are we managing that, even as we're excited to move into the next phase? And I say this in context, I just came from a meeting where I heard that one of our local hospitals right now has a larger daily intake of emergency room visits right now than pre-COVID times. And people who are coming in ill are coming in more ill because they've delayed the process of coming and being scared to come into the hospital, right? But how closely are we watching that, and how quickly are we getting a turnaround on our metrics so that we make sure that our business communities are safe as we progress?
Well, my understanding.
Oh, yeah.
No, go ahead. I didn't know if the question was directed at me, but I'd be happy to defer to somebody else. Otherwise, I could answer it.
I would love to have you address it because you're more familiar with HHS and public health than the other two of us here.
Well, a couple of things which are of note, and I think they're positive metrics, and that is that we've not had any outbreaks in our homeless community. We've got provisions for isolation and quarantine, but really just mercifully, we haven't had an outbreak, which I think is really indicative of how on top of it our public health protocol is. Also, if you look at the protocols and the requirements for phase 2, they're pretty strict about being able to do contact tracing with an original case and doing it within 24 hours. So you get a positive case, the contact tracing has to be initiated in 24 hours, and you need to have a 70%, I believe this is the correct number, 70% tracing metric for each positive case. So I think when you add that into it, and the fact that the state is going to be monitoring this data as we go along, we have built in that 20% surge capacity for all our healthcare facilities. So I think that's enormous. We've never had to deal with that. It's never been an issue. But the emergency department utilization was the big concern and overwhelming the systems. But since we built in that capacity and we've been under capacity, even because people are afraid to go to the hospital, as you mentioned. But I don't think that that's a concern right now, in that they've really tightened up the requirements for showing that the contact tracing with each additional positive case is being watched closely, to the point where you're saying you have to get this done in 24 hours.
Right, and as a follow-up, or to add to that, that 70% is in order to 70% of cases have to be completely traced out to their source in order for us to move on in the metric to phase 2, right? And right now we're not quite meeting that, but it's correct me if I'm wrong, Commissioner, but I think it's historically we haven't been able to do that. So we're not at that metric now, but I think we're doing it. Can you clarify?
So my understanding is that is one we had missed, I believe, this week or last week, but we have historically, I think, met that. I'd have to go back and look. I know that it was a question of just 1 week we didn't, 1 week we did, unless that's another metric I'm thinking about. But that 70%, that's the one that all of the counties are kind of getting stuck on. But I know, as we've seen with phase 1 opening, that there's been a little bit of grace given for not meeting individual metrics to that degree.
Mary and Casey, I wasn't on that call this morning. I was on a NACO Healthy Communities conference that dealt with COVID, and what was discussed at the NACO meeting this morning as far as the contact tracing is there's finding more and more counties around the United States are finding they definitely have the capacity, but they're running into a lot of dead ends. That people, when they call for the contact tracing, they just don't want to talk. So I was wondering, at the state, how are they handling that 70%? If you're a contact tracer and you contact 2 or 3 people that were related to a case, and they just don't want to talk to you, does that go down as part of your 70% because you've done the tracing, or where does that fall in?
Commissioner Starrett, would you like to? There you go.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think as Commissioner Kula alluded to, is that 70% has to be an actual a match, like a contact that you've actually made contact, and it is the minimum of 70% of the new positive cases have to be traced to the existing positive case. So if you refuse to give information, that hasn't actually been an actual trace.
I think.
Okay, thanks, Mary.
Yeah, Shannon, Buckmaster, did you have a follow-up?
I really appreciate the extra information, Commissioner Starrett, Commissioner Commissioner Kula, and Commissioner Olson. Is there a possibility before we submit our application, maybe next Wednesday, to have the most current numbers released for a county, just so our business community understands where we're at, how well phase 1 worked? I would love for this to be a very transparent process. And I know you all excel at transparencies, which is why I feel very comfortable bringing this request.
I know our Health and Human Services Director, Dr. Manfred, has been really good about giving us information on a daily basis. But if there's a particular metric that you're looking for, if you want to just send us an email, I'll make sure that Lindsay gets that and then put you on the distribution list.
Thank you. I'm just looking for a snapshot of where we are as a county and if there has been any significant change during phase 1.
Okay, I will get that information to you.
I do. Thank you, Commissioner. I do know that we had an 11% increase in case numbers, positive cases, from Friday to Friday of the last week. But that's, to put that into some context, that's not people came to Yamhill County from outside of Yamhill County, and then we got a bunch of cases. When we receive case tests, they're from a span of symptom onset days. So it doesn't necessarily tell us that that we have an outbreak, if that makes sense.
And we're also, we have the twice weekly testing. Virginia Garcia is doing testing out at the fairgrounds. So with the increased testing and getting increased positives, that doesn't necessarily mean that we have necessarily symptomatic people or hospitalizations. And that was the big caveat there was what is our hospital capacity looking like?
Exactly. Shannon, do you have any other follow-ups?
Not yet, thank you.
Okay. Do we have any other questions for Commissioner Starrett?
And not exclusively maybe for Commissioner Starrett, but for folks who were on the call this morning, and I wasn't able to be on that call. I was on a work call at that time. One of the questions I keep getting from my community is whether executive order, I'm sorry, my kids are coming to get popsicles. Okay. Whether Executive Order 2012 might be lifted during phase 2, specifically what I keep being asked about is things like pools, skate parks, basketball courts, playgrounds, things for kids to do that are outdoors, which sounds like most guidance has said is lower threat, lower risk. And while I know that's a separate executive order and not necessarily a phase thing, so long as that executive order stands, I'm just curious about how those outdoor activities might be affected in phase 2.
They're all called out specifically: youth sports, overnight camps, indoor activities, outdoor activities, a certain outdoor rec is called out for phase 2.
Okay, so I guess it's just from a technical standpoint. So are you expecting to see Executive Order 2012 go away and then that new guidance? I've been kind of stuck on some of those orders because the orders stand, but then the guidance is like, okay, we're releasing this part of it. And I'm curious if at phase 2, we might see actually a dissolution of those orders, and maybe something that would clarify which things remain, if that makes sense. I feel like we're slowly peeling back the orders instead of creating something new, and I'm kind of stuck in some of those orders, I guess.
Wouldn't that be up to the governor to make those decisions? And I think each executive order stands until rescinded. So if she's rescinding it because she's amending it, or in some way amending it, I don't know. That would be a question for the governor's office. We could certainly find out.
Yeah, I can definitely pursue that with the governor's office too. I just was curious if there was discussion this morning in the phase 2 part that those orders might be rescinded.
Not that I heard.
Okay,
No.
thanks.
And yeah, that's what I understood it to be, was that each additional new, say when a county goes into phase 1, and then when a county goes into phase 2, that the phase 2 guidance, for example, modifies anything in 2012, but 2012 stays, partly because it's a statewide. And so Multnomah County, they still have to abide by all of 2012. I think that's the mechanism. But again, Commissioner Starrett and Commissioner Olson have really strong connections to the governor's office. So I bet they do. Actually, Mayor Witowski is probably just as equipped to figure it out. But I think that's where we are right now. All right, thank you very much, Commissioner Starrett. I would love to go, just while we're like heavy on commissioners, to Commissioner Olson. What would you like to tell people in the community today?
Well, Casey, as you and Commissioner Starrett, as you and Mary know, I've been focusing a lot of my effort on looking at the guidelines and working with small mom and pop businesses and restaurant and entertainment establishments. The word that's going out is because since the guidelines haven't been completed for phase 2 for restaurants yet, and the information just submitted, that there is a lot of the restaurant owners are very dubious that anything from phase 1 will change in the phase 2 guidelines. They don't really expect, besides the social distancing, where you use plexiglass panels or modified, they really don't expect to see any changes as far as phase 2 for the restaurants. Now, fortunately, in McMinnville and the ones I visited in Newberg, they're holding their own, put it that way. They're just being able to get enough business. They're holding their own. Fortunately, I've visited some businesses, one specific in Newberg that had enough space in a back area they weren't using. They were able to spread out, so they're maintaining all of the social distancing and all of the phase 1 guidelines, and they're still at conserved full capacity. So, but there is that concern. There's not a big belief from restaurant owners or small businesses, Main Street type businesses, that there's going to be anything in phase 2 that will be anything significantly different than the phase 1 guidelines.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner. And along those lines, I'm going to solicit opinions now from Joya and Shannon actually about that, because I think you've heard from quite a few restaurants, bars, tasting rooms. Can you add to that?
Sure. What I heard back, and I've sent it to you, Commissioner Kula, the bars are struggling with the 10 p.m. curfew. So I am happy to see that they're considering a midnight curfew. Folks that are bartenders professionally, this is what they do. They know when someone's had too many. And, the concept of the fact that, we're going to limit it to 10 o'clock so people don't drink too much and, they start hanging on each other. That doesn't seem to play out for the bartenders. So they feel very confident in their ability to keep that, that midnight and maintain that social distancing. Restaurants, I heard from one restaurant and the comment was that his food costs are ridiculously high. and particularly for meats. And so that has been very difficult. I'm sure it's impacting their prices, and they've probably had to, raise their prices for that, although we did not have a conversation specifically about that. So yeah, they are, in general, if you've got a large enough restaurant, you're doing okay. If you've got a small restaurant, there are small restaurants that haven't opened. They're only still doing curbside. And that's some of the restaurants on 3rd Street. So, and I think some of the wine tasting rooms have opened as well. But I'll leave it to someone else to talk about that. Thanks.
Shannon, would you like to add?
Yeah, I can confirm what Joya shared. Our businesses are surprised by what it's actually looked like to reopen under phase 1 guidelines. Several businesses are still opting not to open in Newberg as well, recognizing that there's a financial threshold with what they can do, not only for reduced capacity and restrictions, but also the increased costs for food, supplies, and PPE. One hairdresser is closing back down after she was quoted $2,000 to get the minimum PPE required to service a very small portion of her customer base. So actually within the last 24 hours, I've heard of 3 businesses who are voluntarily shutting back down because it's not a financially viable model for them to operate under. I will say that there's also growing concern about litigation, lawsuits happening. One of our local businesses, of course, I'm not going to say who, is newly facing 2 lawsuits related to some of the challenges of, we'll just say it's value of what this business owner is able to provide under the restrictions versus the guaranteed service or expectation of what was supposed to be delivered. So there's growing concern in that regard as well. I'm still hearing a lot of out-of-town people coming into our businesses, people driving 2 hours one way for a drop-in gym day, as well as a lot of out-of-town people for, the standard dining out, bars, haircuts, all of that. So we're still at a hot point. I can also say within the same 24 hours, actually 2 businesses have also reported that they're permanently closing now. So there's still a challenge that they're not able to get the money quickly enough in this cash flow issue to be able to wait it out until more relief comes. So I don't have good news on phase 1.
And it looks like, Councilors, thank you for telling us sobering news. It looks like Councilor Drapkin has a question or comment for you.
Yes, thank you, Commissioner. On the lawsuits, I understand that you need to keep anonymity on that. I've heard a lot of conversation also with concerns to liability issues. Is that specifically what these lawsuits are pertaining to? Can you address that a little bit? And then what would the body be that would be starting to look for some legal representation for the broad commercial, so that not each and every business owner needs to go out and hire a lawyer to redo whatever contract, et cetera, for some protections?
Yeah, so I do know of some businesses who are so concerned about liability who are not going to reopen just because of that. Specifically personal care services, so massage, chiropractor, personal stylists, manis and pedis, just because there's a greater degree of contact. And also gym facilities as well.
So they're concerned that they would be liable if somebody became infected in their business.
Yes, and this is not just consumer liability. There's also a great concern about employee-employer relation liability as well. So if an employee comes in and is subjected to abnormally high volumes for exposure and then get sick, or if there are several employees that get sick, then you have a class action lawsuit. So on our panel on Tuesday, we had started the conversation. I know it's more likely to be a state solution, but there is conversation at the federal level that I've asked for our federal representatives to start proactively thinking about this so that businesses don't have legal costs on top of all the other costs that they're facing. And I will say, even even with the challenging report that I have on phase one, our business owners are really engaged. They want to safely serve their customers with employees that they are loyal to. They want to keep it local. They want to keep it safe. Other challenges are creating the problem. People coming in, people not behaving, people not wearing masks, and then really widespread fear as well. So it's that consumer capitalist balance that we're talking about. People really need a paycheck, but they need it safely. And so even some of our local businesses, because they can't compete with the challenges, they're not able to safely pursue a paycheck.
How does this gathering of people feel? And I've been looking for some sort of data on this. I know it's been quote unquote effective in other towns and counties, not just in Oregon, but around the US. But I have not been able to supply HHS with hard data, but about businesses requiring, and I know this is there's a lot of mixed emotions around that, including I have a lot of mixed emotions around this, but if there was a mandate that businesses require people with masks to enter the businesses, and could there be potential protections that come with that? I know one city has just made available all these signs that say no shoes, no shirt, no mask, no service. And I understand that, that will infuriate many people. But I'm wondering your thoughts, and really everybody's thoughts on that.
If I could just, pardon me, Commissioner.
Oh, no, I was thoughts from the gathering, but please go ahead. And then I also want to make sure Mayor Cape unmuted himself and then muted himself again. So I just want to make sure that he also didn't have a follow-up. Okay, great. Go for it, Shannon.
I just also wanted to put out there, as far as requiring masks, we allow any of our businesses right to refuse service to anyone. You can come into a deli with a really bad attitude, and if you're verbally abusing the other person on the counter, you can be bounced. So that's part of the freedom that we have as entrepreneurs, as business owners, that you can set those restrictions. The challenge is, as leaders, to support whatever decision is being made culturally, so that we don't include the divisiveness. And I do want to put something out there. There are a lot of reasons why people would not wear a mask: severe asthma, mental health conditions, other restrictions that you don't know unless somebody's personally advertising as well. So we have to be mindful. And if, as a county or even as a state, as we progress toward masks for all, if you're in public, there has to be an exception policy.
Yeah, thank you, Shannon, for those good thoughts. Other folks, since that was a question that was directed at everybody, do other people here have thoughts on that? Wendy Belize unmuted herself.
Well, I'm muting myself because we have to remind ourselves that not everyone can read and not everyone can read English. So when you're thinking about this, I would think about language, and I would think people with disabilities, so that we're communicating as much as we can with everyone.
Thank you very much for adding that. Points very well taken. Other thoughts on the mask issue? Commissioner Olson?
My only thoughts, it's not really on that. It's what Joey was talking about, food costs. A couple of the restaurants I checked with, is their actual meat cost has gone up by about 35%. Now they're trying to absorb some of that, but they had to raise their prices about 10 to 15%. Their real fear is, because they're raising their prices, not on their that they have to pay for the goods, that when we come out of this at phase 3 or whenever, that a lot of their customers who have been regular customers for years will not come back, because they see what the prices are happening. So it's a double-edged sword to a lot of the restaurants, is that they're limiting their capacity, they're increasing their prices, They have to say more liability, and so you put all those things together. And I know of two in McMinnville that are thinking about not reopening because of their basically just car drive up now, but to close down totally because you add those things together, they can afford to do business.
Yeah, thank you for adding those thoughts, Commissioner. On the mask issue, I was going to solicit some feedback from Commissioner Starrett. I think of Commissioner Starrett as a real strong libertarian, but I also know that she has such a strong heart for people's health and her knowledge of HHS. So I'm curious, Commissioner Starrett, what are your thoughts on mask wearing?
Well, that civil liberties part is really important. I had a constituent who reached out because his son was having some issues because he has bronchial asthma. And so I, was looking around for the ADA requirements, and that the employer needs to make some accommodation for an existing or a documented medical condition. I know when I've had to wear a mask, I have some severe issues in terms of anxiety with that over my mouth. And it's been an issue for me, and I get it. However, I was looking into some of the information about masks where, if you remember in the beginning, they said, don't wear a mask, it's ineffective. Then they said, everybody wear a mask. And then I was looking at a National Institute of Health study this morning that talked about the fact that even asymptomatic people who are carriers are not spreading it. The mask is not effective in that they're not spreading it, and that the mask is really not an effective. That basically wearing a cloth mask, you're capturing bacteria. You're, if you've ever had to breathe into a paper bag for hyperventilation, you're basically breathing in a poisonous gas. So I know all day long for people to have to wear these masks, and even I know there are some businesses I won't frequent because I'm not comfortable wearing a mask. I think it's one of those things where when you start to mandate, and what's the law say? Well, the governor's executive order says that there has to be an accommodation for people who refuse to wear a mask because you're making a mandate on a covering. I get the no shirt, no shoes, no service. So it's going to be up to individual businesses that have the right to do it, but people have the right not to. I choose not to wear a mask. If it was effective, I would. But what I'm reading shows that it's not.
Okay, great. Thank you, Commissioner, for adding those thoughts. Joya and Shannon, from the business community standpoint, do you have anything more you'd like to communicate to people?
I do. I heard yesterday, I just wanted to give you maybe a legislative update, if that's okay. I heard yesterday that, or it might have been Wednesday, there's been a lot happening this week. There's the HEROES Act was signed and voted by the House, and it's still sitting in the Senate. There was a new bill that was, and forgive me, I've got to look through my notes for a second here, that would help small businesses. There's about $100 million still out there in the PPP program. So businesses that are seeking, still looking for assistance and funding, there is money out there. And so I want to make sure that folks know about that. And if they, forgive me, I just have to keep looking for where I put my notes. Too many pages. That would be helpful to them. And we are waiting to hear what the Senate's going to do. We expect the Senate is going to come up with their own phase 4 bill. And we have no idea what that's going to look like right now. So that's sort of the legislative update. And chamber-wise, we're opening on the 8th here at the chamber office. Of course, we will be following guidelines and things like that. And just got we used some old windows that we had, so it looks like the inside of the building. The outside of the building is on the inside of the building. We're repurposing things. So Mark Paletto helped us put that together today. So that's kind of what I've got to share. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. And Shannon.
So our chamber does not have current plans to reopen, but we're in a slightly different situation. Yesterday, 2 days ago, Wednesday afternoon, I just picked up keys to our new downtown location. So we're moving off Highway 99W back into the downtown pedestrian corridor. And so we're moving with social distancing protocols and standards all in place, which is enough of a challenge. Let's just be patient with us. But our staff is still available 5 days a week during regular business hours. And of course, I'm available outside of business hours as appropriate and reasonable for all members of our community, not just members. I'm good at turning my phone off, believe it or not. So in addition to, you know, those updates, some of the challenges, I'm glad you asked what experiences were in phase one, because that's a lot of what I had to share today. But I do want to put some good news out there just to remind everybody that we still have good kind of normal business to move forward on. And so for the city of Newberg, I'm happy to say that we are moving forward with our tax increment funding strategy, so urban renewal plans. We're still having those conversations. And we're also starting to move forward again on our school district bond. So again, looking at how we build the general capacity of our community, even as we're in crisis response. And I think sometimes that's just a really good reminder that in this process of continual reactions and disappointments, we still have some sort of structure underlying, and people who are committed to moving forward to goals that we had before things changed.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Shannon. Before we go to mayors, since we're on a business run right now, Wendy Valise from PGE, what would you like to tell people here today and in the community?
Today I don't have any updates. I am curious, and I can wait if there's an opportunity afterwards. I just had some questions about as we're moving towards phase two. We're hearing that some communities will be closing down streets, and so I would be interested to hear from any of the electeds if that is even a thought. It's related to ensuring social distancing.
What a great question. And I think Councillor Drapkin could address that one.
Yeah, so the city of McMinnville is not looking at closing down entire streets, but the city has been working hand in hand with the McMinnville Downtown Association, which of course was a group that was originally formed for our city to protect economic vitality. And so while they've done many other initiatives over recent years, they're reinvigorated in stabilizing the economic vitality of our downtown. And so they are working hand in hand with the city of McMinnville, and the proposal they have together, the MDA director is taking out 2 businesses over the next week to have individual conversations and get feedback, make any final adaptations, and then assuming that there's not a massive revolt against the proposal, so to speak, assuming that enough businesses agree that this will be beneficial and can be utilized, that would go into effect next week. And the proposal does include a weekly adaptation. So you know, it'll be a work in progress, like all things right now.
Thank you.
Great, thank you for that update. And yeah. Shannon, yes.
I'm not an elected official, at least not yet. Just kidding, there's no plan to run. But I can update from Newberg's community. So we're starting this conversation seriously about what it would look like even to expand our sidewalks or to close some of our side streets. We had a bit of an experiment when we opened the Newberg Farmers Market several weeks ago, which closes the south portion of College Street from 99W to 2nd Street. So it's just a 1-block closure, but it's been significant, right? Mixed reviews. People who are participating in the farmers market love it. Businesses who just got the chance to reopen under phase 1, who are part of that closed area, don't love it as much. So, you know, it's interesting as we think about an equitable impact for changing our structure. We're in a slightly different situation, of course, because a state highway is our downtown thoroughfare. So we have different considerations with evacuation routes, resiliency, just even the visual distraction signs for ODOT. Wendy, I'm pleased to get your question. Connor Wrighton from Northwest Natural has also reached out with this question, and Newberg City Manager Dan Weinheimer and I are having a conversation also in looping in the Downtown Coalition and our community coordinator, Doug Rux, to make sure that we have a good solution that doesn't impact access, doesn't impact emergency services, particularly with gas lines in the case of Northwest Natural, or power lines in the case of PGE. So we're being mindful of that. And since you unmuted, I do want to give recognition to PGE as a company. I'm really impressed not only with the financially generous response that we've seen with your contributions to the Oregon Community Foundation and other charitable projects, but I just heard that your corporate offices are going to voluntarily remain closed through January of 2021 so that you're not inviting risk for your employees or community members, and also allowing that space even on the sidewalk in the downtown Portland area for people who really do need to return to work. So way to go, PGE, for setting a great example for our professional community.
Thank you. I will pass that along. Thank you.
Yeah, Dan, thank you. That's an excellent update from the city of Newberg. I appreciate it. All right, thank you, Wendy. Did you have anything else you would like to add, Wendy?
No, thank you.
Okay, great. Mayor Wojtowski, I would love if you could speak to folks. You've already brought up the issues around playgrounds, and I know that in the community that's been a topic of discussion, but I'd also love to hear from you. Mayor Cape has so ably kept us informed about education landscape, but I'd love to hear from your perspective as well.
Yeah. Well, we of course have our graduation coming up. There was a little bit of coverage on what we're doing for that. Unfortunately, the weather is threatening our plans a little bit. We were hosting families in the right-of-way at host homes for a parade so that parents and aunts and uncles could watch their graduate receive their diplomas, but I don't feel great about asking people to stand out in the rain for 3 hours while we go household by household to deliver those. So we will see, if that adjusts. Looking to next year, we're having lots of discussions about some of the communications we've seen from ODE, and the CDC guidelines and suggestions for education. Those, of course, we don't have plans in place yet. They're still receiving lots of feedback from parents and educators on what our schools could be looking like. So that's, I would say, all up in the air right now. So, for me, I'm trying to kind of go, what does this week look like? I have been in my classroom quite a bit lately. We've been doing interviews for new staff and things like that, and being back in the building has kind of brought back kind of a grief that I expect will also be there in the fall if we return to buildings as normal, because getting back in there, I remember what this should look like right now as I celebrate with my seniors and get them across. So it's, being in education is so tricky right now. It's obviously everything we're going through is unprecedented. But our kids are resilient, and they will be okay. They're missing out on a lot, but we're doing everything we can to provide them with special moments where that is practical and safe. And yeah, you touched on it. I asked about it earlier. My community is very excited to see things like playgrounds and parks reopen for normal functions. I know that there's been some actually pretty extensive studies about how the virus survives on surfaces outside in the sun and things like that. But I don't know that all of that is conclusive. And so we're hoping to see adjustment. But I need to be able to trust the guidance of public health, because I'm an elected official and not a public health authority. So I'm trying to make sure that I just use that data and those conclusions to inform the city's decisions. We are trying to, while a lot of folks are canceling their festivals and community events, you're probably not surprised to find that I'm trying to find loopholes to do them anyway. And so we are looking at our Old Timers Festival, which has been going on for 80 some years, maybe 90 some. I'd have to count it out at this point. That's the last weekend in July. We're hoping, obviously, that we're in phase 2 at that point. And what we're looking at is trying to do, we typically have our Friday night event series where we have concerts and vendors in the park every week, car shows and things like that. That for right now is suspended, at least for part of the summer. There is another group looking at some options for that, but what the city is looking at for our festival is an event we're calling Band on the Run. and having 5 or 6 bands playing in different areas, different neighborhoods, and then rotating through so that everybody gets a concert from their front yard. And we actually, every year on that weekend, we also have a firefighter chicken barbecue. The firefighters had canceled their barbecue, so instead I'm trying to facilitate a fundraiser for them where the firefighters would be delivering food from our restaurants to folks' homes so that they can still have that community meal and they can still get a fundraiser done. And we're calling that the Don't Stand So Close to Me dinner. So we're still looking at doing our senior court. I like the laugh. Thank you, everybody. I'm here till whatever time we get off this call. We're looking also at still coordinating a senior court and having them parade with the bands. So if anybody knows a great song title about a king and a queen that might be really witty, is there anybody ready to unmute? Okay, well, I'm looking for a song title for a great coronation.
Heroes.
Heroes?
Yeah,
That's
David
good.
Bowie's Heroes.
Yeah, that's not bad. That's
Which
not bad.
is different than I need a hero.
It is different.
Okay, so
Into the Heroes Act. I mean, it's very timely. King, queen, and
I might have to listen. I might have to check out the lyrics really closely. Anyway, so we're trying really hard to find ways for the community to do things together, to stay connected, to maintain some of our celebrations in the safest way possible, to maintain some of those fundraisers, even like for the firefighters, but in the safest way possible. And that's where we are for the school or for the city, whatever hat I had on at that time. One other thing for the recreation I know is that coaches are really itching to use school facilities for things not necessarily like competitions, but even for workouts and for practices. And so again, I will call the governor's office. I'm sure I can get some answers from there too, but just for other people watching the call, I am seeking guidance also on how that will balance with, again, the earlier executive orders that said no use of school facilities until June 30th. And if we enter phase 2 as early as June 6th, if that might mean that coaches are allowed to do workouts and practices earlier, we'll want to be aware of that. So I'll be pursuing that.
great, thank you.
While you're having that conversation about schools, do you mind also kind of an addendum to that, asking about use of schools at campuses for non-traditional things that are not school related, if there are services that could be provided to the community?
Would you mind sending me an email if you have something like an example that I could use? That'd be great. Okay.
Mayor Wojtowski really likes stories. They're effective at communicating information. So, but I like non-traditional uses of schools as a phrase. Okay, thank you, Mayor. Did you get everything that you'd like to share? Thank you. Councillor Drabkin, did we get a City of McMinnville kind of status?
Yeah, I do not have a tremendous amount to report this week. Linfield did have their graduation. They did a drive-by graduation. One of the biggest impacts we are seeing in the city right now, or the potential huge impact, is that that there is a potential large influx of money to YCAP from the emergency board in rental assistance dollars, and if the emergency board does release those funds, not just for the city of McMinnville, but our entire county will benefit from a tremendous amount of rental assistance dollars coming in. I think the other things that I would have touched on have really been covered, so I'll just leave it at that.
Great, thank you very much. And there is a note that the titling of all these group efforts in Dayton was a community effort, and definitely, I just want to acknowledge, Band on the Run plus Don't Stand So Close to Me is phenomenal. Way to go, City of Dayton. Yeah, I mean, I want to sing the next song, right? Don't do that. Okay, Mayor Cape, what would you like to tell people in the community today?
I
will tell them I will not be singing, unlike their commissioner. He can carry that crown for all of us. Sorry about earlier. I realized I'm at our main office today, working by myself, and we're just off of I-5, and so I realized there might be some I-5 traffic noise hearing. So that's why I turned off I forgot to turn off my microphone earlier. Not a whole lot for us to report. You know, we have moved. We finished our budget committee. Yay! Might have been a record one night. Get in, get done, get out. You know, I always say it helps when you don't have money to really have to worry about discussing. And the forecast makes it look even like there's less money to discuss. So, you know, I think all in all, our budget is in a better place than I was worried about. You know, of course, that's still forecast. We'll have to see what actually does come in. So we're hoping for some decent numbers to stay where they're at. You know, one of our biggest complaints we get every year is not enough road repairs. And I think we will continue to hear those complaints for the foreseeable future. That's probably the one big area that we're going to see hit in our funding, and we don't do enough as it is. So, you know, that's going to be problematic. But other than that, we're just continuing to plug along. Excited to dig in a little bit more into the phase 2 proposals for reopening, and see how that's going to affect us. I know the businesses that have opened up in town seem to be doing well, and they appreciate the customers that are coming back. So that is nice. The Blue Goat is opening up. I know a lot of people enjoy their food, so I believe they are not for dine-in, but for takeout. At least that's what I last heard. So, but hopefully another establishment for people to enjoy some really good food there. So, I did also want to touch base. Casey, you had mentioned, I think, these are starting to run together. I don't remember the last time, but the Amity Business Relief Facebook page. And so I just wanted to touch on that. You know, what a great thing that's come about organically. Just people in our town, some former business owners, you know, still heavily involved in the town, and just trying to think, how can we support the businesses that have really been struggling financially the last couple of months. And so they created a new Facebook page, Amity Business Relief Fund, and they sponsor one business a week, and hopefully that business has a Venmo account, but if not, they find a way to work with them to help get the funds. But then every week, people that are in a position to do so financially can contribute directly through Venmo to that business that's being sponsored. All the money goes straight to them. Nobody gets any money off of that. Those that want to pay cash, they can go to the Amity Market. They have at the cash registers, they have a place there where you can bring in cash, and then they get that money directly to that business as well. And then it's just really growing, and it's one of those beautiful things that makes you feel good. People coming up with kind of unique, different ways to help other people when they need the help. And so I can't really take any credit for it. Other great people with great minds doing stuff like that. I know my family, both my wife and I, being teachers and working with the schools, we're blessed to still have paychecks. So we've been able to participate every week with those, helping those businesses. And so that's really kind of the details of it. If anybody wants to know about it, you know, log on to that page, and it doesn't take much to kind of figure out what they've done and how they've done it. It's just a really good feel good type of a deal. So that's really my whole story.
Awesome. Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, it's really fun to see. I get the Facebook notifications every time there's something new on Amity Business Relief, and there's a great energy for the community that's come out of that. So thanks for giving us a little more details. I think the only thing before we get out of here that I wanted to mention was to both to people in the community and also here on the call, if you have a very particular person who is waiting for unemployment benefits and hasn't heard, either through the pandemic unemployment or through the regular channel of regular unemployment, have them email me. We have kind of, between Senator Boquist and Jody Christensen, we've been able to get particular individuals in front of them and calls from the Oregon Employment Department. It's the people who are doing that work are fielding calls for a lot of other commissioners right now, but we're able to at least get them a real person to say, hey, you need to check this box and you forgot to check it, that kind of thing, or here's how to set your PIN again. So those have been huge for the people that they've been able to reach, even though there's still too many people who haven't received unemployment benefits. Both
Casey,
on the, oh yeah.
Just a couple general comments. One going back to you said about the unemployment. I had a constituent contact Commissioner Starrett and myself for a veteran regarding they hadn't heard anything back for 11 weeks from the unemployment. So talking to a couple of our state delegation and talking to Jerry Wilson, our Veterans Services Office, it turns out that veteran had never got his call back from unemployment, of course, but he forgot, and let's just go, he forgot to check 2 boxes on the form. And with help from Senator Boquist and Jerry Wilson, our VSO, and Ron Noble, we had that taken care of. And the next day, he was all completed, and a week later, he got his unemployment. So I think that's just, and it brings me to the last comment I want to make before we all go. You talk about doing things differently and successes. Our town halls, the way we do them with private business, business members, state delegation, sometimes federal delegation, and the county and the mayors and everybody else, that next Wednesday, one of our Southern Oregon counties who had heard about our town hall is having their first town hall, and one of our Eastern Oregon counties Monday is having their first town hall, and they're both based on what Commissioner Kula started, and they're both based on ours, and Joy and everything. And they said that's something that after COVID's over, they plan on continuing to do, because there's no place else you can get everybody together in one room and talk. So I'd like to just congratulate and thank everybody on our calls for taking part in that, because it's something that they looked at Yamhill County as a leader, and again, and other counties are adopting the same thing we're doing now. So.
Yeah, well, I really appreciate. Thank you, Commissioner Olson. I got to say, every week, I appreciate the 2 individuals on the panel, especially who are right down below me in the screen, and that's Phil Guzzo from McMinnville Community Media, who shows up to record it and then rerun it. And then Mayor Wojtowski gets us in. She answers all those emails. She texts back and forth with me real quick beforehand. And generally, she was the one who got it started. So, but everybody here who has continued to provide people in the community with the knowledge that they have, to reassure, to provide information, and to show that we're all working together, I think is so huge. So thank you, Commissioner Olson, for this.
I think I agree, Casey, because you may not have the information. Maybe Joya might not have the information, Mayor Capes or Mayor Bicossi, but when we all get together like this, somebody usually has the information. And that information would not be passed on if we weren't meeting like this as a group.
Yeah, definitely. I do want to note that at least McMinnville Community Media would be happy if at some point we're able to just go to Tuesdays. And I can hear the blank screen here laughing, even though he's not. So, but let's consider that sometime in the summer, just so that they don't have to be here all the time and they can go to the river.
Yeah, I'll talk to Jerry Eichen and tell him what he needs to do.
All right, Joanna, you had something to say as well.
Thanks. I just wanted to share that we have a contact at WorkSource Oregon, and we've had some emails from folks getting in touch with us because they haven't got their unemployment insurance. And we have connected them with our contact there, and they have been so responsive and so helpful, and just within a few days taking care of them. So if there are other issues, please get in touch with us as well. We're happy to make those connections for our community with the WorkSource Oregon folks. And I also would like to reiterate thanks to all of you, whoever was involved in making this all happen. It has been a great opportunity to participate and to learn about what has happening in our community, and to be able to share what's happening as well. And I am very grateful for it, and I'm happy to continue participating. Thank you. I know we're after 2 o'clock. I will stop now. Thank you so much. Good to see everybody.
All right, thank you. And just final note, remember out there in the community, everyone here is working for you. Reach out to us. We'll problem solve and help you. We're our leaders. We're your leaders because we want to help you. So, all right, thank you very much, and we will see you.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.